Moved its financial reform bill last December without a single Republican vote. California Congressman Darrell Issa helped lead opposition to the bill, and he joins me from the Capitol. Congressman, good to see you. Are you voting yes on anything these days? Here's my question. Was there not enough good in the bill that you could have at least held your nose and voted yes on it?
Well, first of all, the private sector does very well without us most of the time. So before we do something to, quote, rein in the private sector, let's make sure we do no harm. And this bill, as you can imagine, what we see wrong with it in a non-bipartisan bill, there are no Republicans in the House or the Senate today, so no one can, including CNN, can proclaim that it's bipartisan until after they get a Republican. They haven't really done it. Whether there's a $50 billion bailout package or not, Main Street Americans want to know why one group is too big to fail and the rest of us, if we screw up, bankruptcy is where we end up. The fear of failure is a good thing in an economy. It causes people to be more cautious, it causes them to invest wisely, and it causes them to work harder. That's what the rest of us have to deal with. I don't want anything in Wall Street that either makes them, quote, government stepchildren that can't fail, or in fact causes them to fail artificially.
Well, wait a minute. Congressman Issa, Chuck Grassley has voted yes on some new rules to govern derivatives. That's a step in the bipartisan direction, isn't it?
Look, if you want to break bills down to parts that we agree on and pass them, that's a pretty ezy thing to do. The president could have done that on health care.
But you're suggesting there's nothing going on here that is bipartisan, and that doesn't seem to be the case.
But it's very clear that your bill that has some things you like is exactly how we got in trouble. Appropriations for decades basically bought votes by putting something in somebody's home district. And the American people understand that 40% of our budget is now borrowed because, in fact, we put something in there for every vote. We just didn't care about the fact that we didn't balance the budget. We weren't fiscally conservative. Republicans are learning from decades of mistakes we participated in.
Okay,
and we hope the Democrats appreciate that the problem with Freddie and Fannie is not addressed here, and it won't be addressed if it's not part of this kind of reform. And ultimately, the House and the Senate voted on a bipartisan basis to have a commission to study the causes of this. That commission is still out. So what's the hurry to do that? Well, in fact, Freddie and Fannie are not included in this.
Well, you start with the big financial firms. You start with trying to reform a system so that you don't get an AIG again, you don't get a Citigroup again, and then you do it.
I hear you, except for one thing. AIG's FP division in Britain is not part of this reform. The group that created this is not part of this reform. And by the way, Moody's and the other rating agencies, they're not part of it. So you have Freddie and Fannie, who helped create this euphoric market and bought a huge amount of these with your taxpayer guaranteed dollars. You have the foreign corporation in Britain who actually underwrote this stuff in an insurance-like instrument. And you have the rating agencies who constantly gave things AAA. It's what's not in this bill that is every bit as important as the things in this bill that should be taken out. And if you want a bipartisan bill, you look at the entire problem and you realize that there are some oxes being gored on both sides. In this case, Senator Dodd and former Senator Obama were the largest recipients of Freddie and Fannie money, and yet they're not offering to give that money back. They're not offering to reform those organizations. And right now, what's really happening is you can get a 3% mortgage from the government, and that's what's operating. That's actually part of the dysfunctional market. We have virtually no money down loans, being the majority of the loans going for homes. But we need to work on those things on behalf of Americans who pay for it.
I don't think anyone would disagree with that, but we don't live in a 100% world, Congressman. No one gets 100% of everything. Why not?
Nobody's asking for 100%, but we're asking not to do harm to our economy. We're recognizing that the fundamental part of a free market is the ability to fail at your own peril, not this perpetual bailout system. And by the way, remember, you said big financial, but when it came time for TARP, which I voted against, big financial included the auto companies. Big financial included a lot of people that weren't there. So let's not pretend that this is only about Goldman Sachs, who's been vilified by the SEC at a very convenient time. This is, in fact, a very important bill. We need to get it right. If breaking it into parts we can agree on, if waiting for the commission to report and then doing more is the right thing to do, then why can't the Democrats take the part we can agree on today and work on these other parts when the commission has reported, which, by the way, is a nonpartisan or bipartisan commission.
What are you suggesting when you say that Goldman Sachs has been vilified by the SEC at a very convenient time? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that it is a very politically motivated attack by the SEC. They could have sued Goldman Sachs 6 months ago. They could sue them 6 months from now. They sued them during the basic run-up week to
what do you
this
have?
event.
What do you have a document? Where do you get to make a claim? What do you have?
Look, first of all, I have letters out to do discovery, and I have not been given responses. You know, you can make the same claim. You know, what do I have on Joe Sistak being offered a job in order to get out of the race by a member of the White House staff? Well, what I have is Congressman Sistak's own statement repeatedly. So do I have other proof? No. But do I have an event that occurred there? Do I have an event with the SEC that shouldn't have happened? You know, the SEC does not release during the trading day, except in this case they released during the trading day, and Goldman goes back down by 13 points. And now there's this whole back and forth about whether this was an appropriate case, or maybe it was just intended to cover up an IG report that said this SEC doesn't do its job. The fact is, Republicans want real reform. We admit that we were part of letting Freddie and Fannie and the escalation of the housing market go on. We're not saying that government isn't at fault. What we're saying is government is at fault, and government is not part of the solution right now. It's only the private sector, and what we're giving the private sector is a pass on being able to fail if they don't do it right the next time. That's the wrong direction, not the right direction.
So, Congressman, do you feel like you got a fair hearing here today?
Well, I certainly think you've made up your mind on one hand, but yes, anytime you let me speak to your listeners and the people there on the margin get to understand that we do, both sides want to reach a good conclusion. This bill is not there. Okay. It would be great if we started calling bipartisan when Republicans and Democrats actually compromise or come to what they agree on. We did that on derivatives. Yes. We can do it on a lot of other things. We can't do it by ramming through a bill and then looking for one person to break a filibuster.
But you would acknowledge that. I know we've got to go. Give me a second here. But you would acknowledge that I can ask questions to elicit a fuller, expanded comment from you. Absolutely. On your positions.
I absolutely enjoy the kind of dialogue that forces me to make my case.